Why does your $500 monthly investment feel painfully slow for 8 years, then suddenly accelerate into significant wealth when you least expect it? While your neighbor, who started the same investment plan 5 years ago, is now watching his account grow faster monthly than your entire annual contributions. Here's what creates this mathematical mystery. Compound growth follows predictable acceleration patterns that most Americans abandon right before the exponential phase begins. The early years feel discouraging because returns appear minimal, but later stages can produce dramatic acceleration under favorable market conditions. Over the next few minutes, I'll reveal why wealth building through consistent investing starts impossibly slow but can accelerate significantly over decades. The third principle shows exactly when your investment returns might begin outpacing your contributions. Important note: all investing involves substantial risk of loss, and historical market averages don't guarantee future results. Individual outcomes vary dramatically based on market conditions beyond your control. If you want to understand compound growth responsibly, subscribe and comment "Compound Power" below. But that's just the beginning. What I'm about to reveal shows why the ice sculptor's patience creates the most beautiful masterpieces. 1. The ice sculptor's patient transformation. Most Americans abandon their investment strategies during the exact phase when mathematical principles are quietly building the foundation for potential wealth acceleration. Understanding why early progress feels discouraging, while later stages can produce dramatic results, determines whether you'll benefit from compound growth or quit before it has time to work. Northern European ice sculptors throughout history faced identical challenges that perfectly illustrate why wealth building through consistent investing requires patience during seemingly unproductive early phases. 2 sculptors received commissions to create elaborate ice masterpieces for royal celebrations, but their approaches to the carving process created dramatically different outcomes. The impatient carver expected immediate, visible results from his efforts. He would attack blocks of ice with aggressive techniques, frustrated when his first few cuts didn't reveal beautiful forms. Each day that passed without obvious artistic progress felt like wasted time and effort, convincing him that his methods weren't working effectively. This sculptor's approach seemed logical. After all, he was putting in genuine work and deserved to see corresponding results. When progress appeared slow or invisible, he would abandon projects and switch to different techniques, constantly seeking faster ways to achieve his artistic vision. The patient master understood something crucial about ice that his impatient colleague missed entirely. Frozen water requires time to reach optimal temperature and consistency for detailed shaping. Most transformation happens invisibly beneath the surface before dramatic results become apparent to outside observers. This master sculptor would spend days preparing his ice, allowing it to reach perfect working condition while making careful, methodical cuts that seemed unimpressive individually, but built toward exponential artistic progress over time. The difference became clear when both sculptors faced demanding deadlines. The impatient carver had nothing to show for his frantic activity except broken ice and frustrated effort. The patient's master revealed masterpieces that seemed to emerge almost magically from his systematic preparation. Your investment accounts follow identical principles during early accumulation phases. Monthly contributions feel painfully small when measured against long-term wealth targets, creating psychological pressure to abandon strategies that seem ineffective. Here's the mathematical reality. If you invest $500 monthly at historically average market returns, your first year produces modest results that feel insignificant compared to your annual $6,000 contribution. This discourages many people who expect immediate wealth-building validation. But compound growth operates like the ice sculptor's patient preparation. Most powerful effects happen quietly over time before becoming dramatically visible. Your early contributions establish the foundation for potential acceleration, even when results appear minimal. Important disclaimer: Historical market averages include significant volatility. Bear markets can reduce account values substantially, and past performance doesn't predict future results. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people about why mathematical acceleration follows predictable patterns once a sufficient foundation has been established. 2. The Miller's grain multiplication. And what I'm about to say is what makes the difference between those who understand exponential growth versus those who expect linear progress and quit when reality doesn't match their expectations. Ancient grain milling provides perfect insight into why compound interest accelerates over time, rather than producing steady, predictable increases. Two millers inherited identical flour operations, but approached the multiplication process with completely different mathematical understandings. The linear thinking miller expected each grinding session to add consistent amounts to his flour output. He calculated that if today's work produced 10 pounds of flour, tomorrow's identical effort should produce another 10 pounds, creating a steady accumulation over time. This miller's approach seemed reasonable and mathematically sound. Equal work should produce equal results, and steady progress should lead to predictable wealth building over extended periods. The exponential thinking miller understood that effective milling creates multiplication rather than simple addition. One grain becomes 2 through processing, 2 become 4, 4 become 8, with each cycle building upon previous results rather than simply adding to them. When both millers started with identical small amounts of grain, their early results appeared similar. But over months and years, the mathematical difference became extraordinary. Linear addition produced steady but limited growth, while exponential multiplication created dramatic acceleration. Modern investment accounts can follow similar patterns under favorable market conditions. Your first $10,000 invested might grow to $11,000 in a good year, a modest gain that feels disappointing. But when your account reaches $100,000, that same 10% return produces $10,000 in growth, matching your entire original investment. Critical reality check. Markets frequently decline, sometimes severely, and compound growth only works with positive returns over extended periods. Economic recessions, market crashes, and inflation can significantly impact these theoretical projections. Wait, there's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to lose everything you're building through understanding these first two principles. Because even patient investing and compound growth awareness mean nothing if you don't understand which variables you can actually control versus which ones remain beyond your influence. 3. The shepherd's growing flock. Don't jump to conclusions, because what comes next can change your perspective completely about why some people build substantial wealth through investing, while others remain frustrated despite identical market conditions and similar starting points. The difference lies in understanding which variables you can control versus which remain beyond your influence. Pastoral communities throughout history faced resource management challenges that perfectly illustrate why successful wealth building focuses on controllable factors rather than hoping for favorable external conditions. Two shepherds inherited identical small flocks from their families, but approached herd management with completely different strategic philosophies. The fixed herd shepherd believed that maintaining a consistent flock size while hoping for favorable weather and market conditions represented the safest approach to pastoral wealth building. He kept exactly the same number of animals year after year, providing adequate care and expecting external factors to determine his prosperity. This shepherd's approach seemed conservative and risk-averse. He avoided the complications of expansion, maintained predictable routines, and felt secure knowing his flock size remained constant regardless of economic or environmental changes. The strategic breeder understood that pastoral success came through optimizing controllable variables while accepting that weather, markets, and diseases remained beyond his direct influence. He gradually increased flock size when resources allowed, improved breeding quality through careful selection, and extended grazing seasons by finding additional pasture areas. Most importantly, this shepherd recognized that he controlled three critical variables in pastoral wealth building: the size of his investment, flock size, the quality of his management, care and breeding decisions, and the time horizon for his strategy, long-term versus short-term thinking. After decades, the mathematical difference was substantial. The fixed herd shepherd still owned roughly the same number of animals, dependent entirely on external market conditions for any wealth improvement. The strategic breeder had built diversified pastoral assets that generated wealth through multiple controllable factors. Your investment strategy operates on identical principles. You cannot control market returns, economic cycles, or political events that affect asset prices. But you can control three crucial variables that dramatically impact long-term wealth-building outcomes. First, you control the amount you invest monthly. Increasing contributions from $500 to $750 monthly can accelerate wealth building significantly over decades. This requires lifestyle adjustments, additional income sources, or expense reductions, all within your direct control. Second, you control the consistency of your investing behavior. Market volatility tempts people to stop contributions during downturns or withdraw funds during emergencies. Maintaining regular investments through various market conditions can substantially improve long-term results. Third, you control the time horizon for your strategy. Starting earlier provides more years for potential compound growth, while extending your timeline by working a few additional years can dramatically increase final account values. Important reality: controlling these variables doesn't guarantee positive outcomes, as market declines can reduce account values regardless of contribution amounts or consistency. But that's just the obvious part. What I'm about to say is what makes the difference between people who keep their investment gains versus those who lose substantial portions to taxation over decades. 4. The orchard keeper's tax harvest. And it's in the next section that many people make mistakes without even knowing it. They successfully control their contribution amounts and timing, but still lose hundreds of thousands in potential wealth by ignoring how taxation affects compound growth over extended periods. Royal agricultural systems throughout history created different tax structures that reveal why understanding tax-advantaged investing can add enormous value to long-term wealth-building strategies. Two orchard keepers managed identical fruit operations, but operated under completely different taxation arrangements. The taxed farmer paid tribute to the royal treasury on every harvest, reducing his ability to reinvest profits into expanding his orchard operations. Each year, a significant portion of his agricultural gains went to tax collectors, rather than purchasing new trees, improving soil, or expanding cultivated areas. This farmer's tax burden seemed manageable annually, perhaps 20 to 25% of his harvest, but compounded over decades into massive wealth transfers from his family to the royal treasury. Resources that could have multiplied into substantial agricultural assets instead funded government operations. The protected grower had negotiated royal exemption status, keeping his entire harvest for replanting and expansion purposes. This arrangement allowed him to reinvest 100% of his agricultural gains into future wealth-building activities. The protected grower's advantage seemed small initially, but it accelerated exponentially as tax savings compounded over time. Money that would have gone to taxation was instead purchased for additional trees, better equipment, and expanded operations. Modern tax-advantaged accounts work similarly. Traditional 401k contributions reduce current income taxes while allowing investments to grow without annual tax drag. Roth IRAs provide tax-free growth and withdrawals during retirement. These advantages can add hundreds of thousands to long-term wealth building. Consider the mathematics. In taxable accounts with 22% tax rates on gains, your effective investment return drops from 10% to approximately 7.8% annually. Over 30 years on $500 monthly contributions, this difference could cost over $400,000 in lost wealth. Important limitations. Tax-advantaged accounts have contribution limits, income restrictions, and early withdrawal penalties that may not suit everyone's circumstances. All of the above will be meaningless if you miss this final detail about why even people who understand compound growth and tax advantages still fail to build wealth when they start too late, or underestimate the mathematical power of beginning immediately. 5. The Desert Traveler's Water Strategy. You think you've understood everything? There's a detail that few people notice, but it's extremely important. Many Americans assume that starting to invest later in life makes wealth building pointless. But this defeatist thinking prevents people from building substantial retirement security even when they have limited time horizons. Desert survival throughout history required water procurement strategies that perfectly illustrate why late-starting investors can still build meaningful wealth despite shortened timelines. Two travelers found themselves in identical survival situations but approached water collection with completely different age-based philosophies. A young well digger had decades ahead of him and could invest enormous effort in digging deep wells that would provide abundant water for extended periods. His approach made mathematical sense. Long time horizons justified intensive upfront investments that would pay dividends over many years. This traveler's strategy seemed optimal for his circumstances. Deep wells required substantial initial effort, but could support communities indefinitely once properly established. His age advantage allowed patient development of water infrastructure that younger people could pursue more effectively than older travelers. The older water collector started his desert journey much later in life, with limited energy for well digging and shortened survival timelines. Instead of attempting to compete with younger travelers' deep well strategies, he focused on efficient water collection methods that could accumulate meaningful reserves within his available time frame. This older traveler understood something crucial that defeatist thinking obscures. Any water source provides better survival chances than dying of thirst, while lamenting that you didn't start collecting decades earlier. The older collector developed systematic approaches to gathering water from multiple smaller sources: morning dew, rainfall collection, and efficient rationing systems. While his total water accumulation never matched the young well digger's abundant supply, he gathered enough resources to sustain himself comfortably throughout his remaining journey. Your investment timeline operates on similar principles. Starting to invest at age 40 or 50 doesn't provide the compound growth timeframes that 20-year-old investors enjoy, but it can still build substantial retirement wealth under favorable market conditions. Consider realistic mathematics. Investing $500 monthly starting at age 40 could potentially grow to approximately $380,000 by age 65, assuming historical market averages continue. This amount won't fund luxury retirements, but can significantly improve financial security compared to having no investments at all. Late starters can accelerate wealth building by increasing contribution amounts, extending working years slightly, or reducing retirement expenses. These strategies require discipline, but remain mathematically achievable for people with steady incomes. Critical reality: later starts mean less time to recover from market downturns, making conservative portfolio management more important than aggressive growth strategies. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people about why every month of investment delay costs exponential future wealth potential. 6. The merchant's opportunity cost. And it's in the next section that many people make mistakes without even knowing it. They understand that late starts can still build wealth, but underestimate the massive mathematical cost of delaying investment decisions while waiting for perfect market timing or ideal financial conditions. Ancient trading markets created time-sensitive opportunities that reveal why procrastination represents one of the most expensive mistakes in wealth building. Two merchants faced identical investment opportunities, but approached decision-making with completely different urgency philosophies. The hesitant merchant spent months analyzing market conditions, researching perfect entry timing, and waiting for ideal circumstances before committing resources to trading ventures. His approach seemed prudent and risk-conscious. Thorough analysis should produce better investment outcomes than hasty decisions. This merchant's delay tactics felt justified because markets do fluctuate, and poor timing can reduce investment returns significantly. He wanted to ensure optimal conditions before risking his capital in uncertain trading environments. The action-taking merchant understood that market timing was less predictable than time in markets. Rather than waiting for perfect conditions that might never arrive, he began investing systematically while continuing to analyze and adjust his strategy based on actual market experience. This merchant faced the same market uncertainties as his hesitant colleague, but gained valuable experience through direct participation rather than theoretical analysis. His early investments sometimes performed poorly, but his overall strategy benefited from extended market exposure. The mathematical difference compounded dramatically over time. At the same time, the hesitant merchant analyzed, the action taker accumulated months or years of potential compound growth. Even if his early investments performed modestly, time in the market provided advantages that perfect timing couldn't replicate. Here's the striking mathematics. Delaying a single $500 investment for 1 month doesn't just cost $500 in opportunity. Assuming historical market averages, that delayed $500 could theoretically grow to approximately $8,725 over 30 years. The opportunity cost of procrastination compounds exactly like investment returns. This principle applies to every investment decision delay. Waiting 6 months to start investing doesn't just postpone wealth building, it eliminates decades of potential compound growth on contributions that could have been made during those months. Important disclaimer: markets can also decline significantly during periods when delayed investors might have avoided losses, making timing genuinely important in some cases. I'll tell you something that many people regret for the rest of their lives, just because they didn't realize it in time. The final 2 principles determine whether your investment strategy actually supports the lifestyle you want or leaves you working longer than necessary. 7. The Monastery's freedom calculation. All of the above will be meaningless if you miss this final detail that determines whether your accumulated wealth actually provides the financial independence you're working toward or leaves you guessing about when you can safely stop working. Medieval monastery management required precise resource calculations that perfectly illustrate why successful retirement planning demands mathematical specificity rather than vague wealth accumulation goals. 2 abbots inherited identical responsibilities for sustaining their religious communities, but approached financial planning with completely different levels of precision. The wishful abbot hoped that wealth would somehow appear when needed, trusting that years of faithful saving would eventually provide adequate resources for community needs. He contributed regularly to monastery coffers without calculating specific targets or understanding how much money would actually support his community indefinitely. This abbot's approach felt humble and faith-based. He worked diligently, saved consistently, and trusted that Providence would provide adequate resources when the time came. His intentions were admirable, but his lack of mathematical planning created uncertainty about whether accumulated resources would actually sustain community operations. The mathematical abbot calculated exactly how much endowment money would support his monastery permanently through careful income generation rather than gradual depletion. He determined that 25 times annual operating expenses invested at 4% returns could theoretically provide sustainable income indefinitely. If monastery operations required 10,000 gold pieces annually, the mathematical abbot knew he needed 250,000 gold pieces in endowment to generate sufficient income through investments rather than consuming principal. This specific target transformed vague wealth-building efforts into actionable planning with measurable progress. Modern retirement planning follows identical mathematical principles. The traditional guideline suggests accumulating 25 times your annual living expenses to support 4% withdrawal rate indefinitely. If you spend $60,000 annually, this formula suggests a $1.5 million retirement target. Important reality check. Current market conditions, low interest rates, increased life expectancy have led many financial advisors to recommend more conservative 3 to 3.5% withdrawal rates, which would require 28 to 33 times annual expenses rather than 25 times. Having specific numerical targets transforms abstract retirement dreams into concrete goals you can measure and plan towards systematically. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people about why complex investment strategies typically underperform simple approaches over extended periods. 8. The Blacksmith Simple Tools. Do you see anything unusual? The answer is right here. The final principle reveals why investors who chase complex strategies and constantly adjust their approaches typically underperform those who master basic techniques and apply them consistently over decades. Medieval craftsmanship created a natural experiment in complexity versus simplicity that perfectly illustrates why investment success often comes from mastering fundamentals rather than pursuing sophisticated techniques. Two blacksmiths inherited identical forges, but approached their craft with completely different philosophical frameworks. The complex experimenter constantly changed his techniques, seeking perfect methods through elaborate processes. He would spend weeks researching new hammer techniques, experimenting with different heating methods, and adjusting his approach based on every piece of advice he encountered from traveling craftsmen. This blacksmith's workshop is filled with specialized tools for specific situations. He owned hammers for different metal types, various heating implements for precise temperature control, and elaborate measuring devices for achieving perfect specifications. His approach seemed professional and thorough. The focused craftsman mastered basic tools that produced reliable, excellent results across various projects. He understood that exceptional craftsmanship came from perfecting fundamental techniques rather than accumulating sophisticated equipment or constantly changing methods. This craftsman's workshop looked almost sparse compared to his colleagues' elaborate setup. He owned high-quality basic tools and had developed deep expertise in using them effectively for virtually any metalworking project. After decades, their work quality revealed the truth about complexity versus mastery. The experimenter's constant method changes prevented him from developing deep expertise in any particular approach. His elaborate tools required maintenance and created decision paralysis about which technique to use for each project. The focused craftsman's mastery of fundamentals produced consistently superior work. His deep understanding of basic principles allowed him to handle complex projects more effectively than his colleagues' sophisticated but constantly changing approaches. Investment strategy follows identical patterns. Complex portfolio construction, frequent trading, and constant strategy adjustments typically reduce returns through fees, taxes, and poor timing decisions rather than improving performance. S&P 500 index funds provide broad market exposure with minimal costs, requiring no stock selection skills, market timing abilities, or complex rebalancing strategies. Historical data suggests these simple approaches often outperform actively managed alternatives over extended periods. Important disclaimer: simple strategies still involve significant risk, including potential for substantial losses during market downturns. Past performance of index funds doesn't guarantee future results. The key insight involves focusing on controllable factors: consistent contributions, low fees, tax efficiency, and long time horizons, rather than pursuing complex strategies that may add costs without improving outcomes. Mathematical precision about targets and simplicity in execution often outperform complex approaches and vague goals, though all investing involves substantial risk regardless of strategy choice. These 8 principles, patient early phases, exponential acceleration patterns, controlling variables you can influence, tax-advantaged growth, starting regardless of age, avoiding procrastination, calculating specific targets, and maintaining simple strategies represent time-tested approaches to long-term wealth building. However, investing involves substantial risks that these stories cannot eliminate. Market crashes can destroy decades of progress, economic recessions affect employment and contribution ability, inflation can erode purchasing power, and historical averages don't guarantee future performance. Individual results vary dramatically based on timing, economic conditions, and personal circumstances beyond your control. These concepts require realistic expectations about both opportunities and significant risks involved in any investment strategy. What's your realistic approach to long-term financial planning? Share your questions about balancing growth potential with risk management in the comments below, and subscribe for content that discusses both investment opportunities and their limitations. Remember, building wealth typically requires patience, discipline, realistic expectations about market volatility, and often professional guidance tailored to your specific circumstances and risk tolerance.